H.R. McMaster is a retired three-star lieutenant general who served as national security advisor to President Donald Trump. He's currently a senior fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution and the author of the new book, Battlegrounds: The Fight to Defend the Free World. Hi, General McMaster. Good to have you on our program.
Hi, Vashi. Great to be with you.
General, we just spoke with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, who is urging Canada and its allies to set up their embassies, reset up, I guess you could say, or reestablish their embassies in Kyiv. Do you think it's important for allies to do that, given the security context?
Absolutely. We should have never left, Vashi. I mean, I was embarrassed that we left. So I'm glad we're getting back. We can't get back soon enough.
Tell me why you were embarrassed. At the time, I remember, there were obviously heightened security concerns, and we do know that Kyiv was a very strong target for the Russians for at least the first half of the war, until the Ukrainians really surprised everyone and were able to keep them at bay.
Well, as a washed-up Army general, I'm not in favor of retreats generally. Right? But I do think it was important for us to create more ambiguity for Putin. At the beginning of this conflict, it seemed as if we're almost green-lighting the invasion by talking about all the things we're not going to do and then evacuating. So I think we made some mistakes that we're compensating for now. We're trying to catch up with in terms of the provision of the weapons that Ukrainians need to defend themselves, the reopening of our embassies. But we got behind at the beginning, and the evacuation of our embassies is part of that. Remember what Churchill said after Dunkirk? He said evacuations don't win wars. And so I think that we would have had a lot of courageous foreign service officers in Canada and the U.S. and in other countries who would have stayed. I mean, the Polish embassy never closed. So I think it was a mistake to pull out. And then we had the embarrassing situation where we offered Zelensky to help him evacuate. And he said, I don't need a trip out of here. I need weapons.
Speaking of weapons, I do want to get your perspective on the $33 billion that the president is asking Congress for. First, should that go ahead? And then I have some questions for you about the supply of weapons as well.
It should go ahead. And I think it's a strong message to Russia. That's half of Russia's defense budget, that $33 billion. And what's going to be really important is not just the number, but what capabilities does that get to Ukrainians? What do the Ukrainians need? Well, right now, they need the ability to deny the Russians the ability to commit mass murder of innocent people by bombarding indiscriminately residential areas, right? And those are some of the drone capabilities to go after their delivery systems and interdicting their convoys. They need shore-to-ship missiles to prevent Russia from conducting amphibious operations against Odessa and elsewhere along the Black Sea, and then to challenge Russia's control of the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. They need tiered and layered air defense capabilities to protect from the missiles and aircraft, and to really gain air superiority, which you can do from the ground. So what's important is not just the number or that there are a lot of weapons coming, but what type of weapons and how can those weapons be combined to give Ukraine the capabilities they need. And then, of course, ultimately, they need offensive weapons, weapons that can be used in an attack to regain their territory. And this is where I would like to see more advice, from our countries to the Ukrainians, some more training to help them, because it's one thing to buy the weapons and get them going there, but then the logistics inside of Ukraine as well, of how to get them to the point of need and to make sure that the soldiers who are using those weapon systems are trained, and you have a real capability associated with it.
In that conversation happening in your country around that ask from the president, there are some lawmakers who have expressed concern that sending so many weapons could deplete American stockpiles and lower the readiness of the American military in case of escalation. What is your perspective on that? Is that accurate?
It is, but hey, do something about it, right? Let's be Americans, not Americans, right? And so what I would like to see is, open up some production lines, Lockheed Martin for more javelins or whatever. So I just think what we need to do is to compensate for the Stinger missiles and the javelins and the other capabilities that I'm sure we are depleting. But of course, Russia's also depleting stocks, and they don't have the industrial capacity. I think maybe now with sanctions either, or the access to supply chains. Now, of course, we have similar problems, right? Globalization has gone too far in terms of supply chains being biased too much in favor of efficiency rather than resilience. And so I think this is a chance for us to look, the United States, for Canada, others. Let's look at our industrial base. What investments do we need to make sure we have the resilience and we have the capacity to mobilize when necessary? Because this isn't the only conflict that we're going to have to respond to, or hopefully even better, deter, especially as we see China getting more aggressive. We see North Korea, about to do another nuclear test. We see Iran, racing to get a threshold nuclear capability and intensifying its proxy war in the Middle East. We have a lot of threats that we're going to have to cope with simultaneously, and I think the best way to do that, obviously, is from a position of strength, and that includes economic strength and our industrial capacity.
And just on if I could, before I let you go, General, ask you about the Canadian context specifically, and the kinds of things you just described should be happening in the United States, because that conversation is happening here as well. And I know that you were part of an administration and administrations before that, which have certainly asked Canada to spend more on defense. There is more in the recent budget that was tabled here, but only that gets us, let's say, to about 1.5% of GDP on defense spending. Do you see that 2% target as arbitrary? Do you see it as something that Canada should be reaching for? And what kind of pressure do you think Canada will face from the U.S. on that issue?
Well, I think Canada should invest more, but that's up to Canadians. Obviously, you're a sovereign country, but part of an alliance in which, in Wales, we all NATO made a pledge to spend at least 2% of GDP. I think the U.S. has to get back to 4% now of GDP, because our defense strategy has been based on some fundamentally flawed assumptions, and we clung to those for so long. And I think this applies to Canada as well. Remember, after the Cold War, everybody thought, oh, hey, the ideological competition is over. An arc of history has guaranteed the primacy of our free and open societies. Great power competition, that's a relic of the past. And by the way, as demonstrated in the Gulf War, our technological military prowess will guarantee our security against any foe that has the temerity to challenge us. Of course, we see that that's not the case, and we've let really deterrence erode, especially in Europe, I would say, and this isn't Putin's first act of aggression, right? Remember, that he poisoned a Ukrainian presidential candidate in 2003. That was the kickoff. He conducted massive cyber attacks against Estonia in 2007, invaded Georgia in 2008, re-invaded Ukraine invaded Ukraine in 2014, re-invaded this February, but he's been engaging in a very aggressive campaign of what you might call Putin's playbook, a sustained campaign of political subversion and so forth. And the best way to deter an aggressive adversary like Putin is with strength, right? Some people think, well, if we do something, it might be provocative. If we provide Ukraine with defensive capabilities, it might be provocative. Hey, actually, it's provocative not to provide Ukraine with adequate defensive capabilities, as we've seen since February 24th.
Okay, General McMaster, thank you very much for your time.
Vashi, thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.